In this presentation, we are looking at plugin caching and the Cache API, which provides ways to work with what is generally called the Moodle Universal Cache, MUC, in your plugins code. This video is an extract from the 12-lesson Moodle Plugin Development by Example course. A link to the course page is in the description. But before we start, if this video proves to be useful and informative, please don't forget to like it. Many REST API services expect clients to cache results, at least for a short period of time, to avoid overloading their servers. So this is even more relevant in our case, because if you consider that if you're in a classroom, there may be 30 or more or around 30, depending on your class size, requests made in a very short period of time to that particular service. So we are going to use caching to actually manage the collection and storage of the content for our module. So let's talk about Moodle caching. There's two aspects to Moodle caching. There's the caching backends, which are the storage bits like MongoDB, APC User Cache, and Redis. These are provided by Cache, more specifically Cache Store plugins. Then there's a Moodle Universal Cache, which is using the caching API, which is used in code. The types of caching, these are defined in the cache classes store PHP. And the type of caching we have a request cache. Constant is mode underscore request, which keeps the content for the duration of the request and is cleared at the end of every request. We also have a session cache, which is the constant is mode underscore session, which is user specific and alive for the user's session. And then the final one we have is the application cache, which is a shared cache that all the users can access, making all the data accessible for a period of time. It is also possible to create ad hoc caches, but this is not a recommended thing to do. Okay, so in your plugin, you will define your cache requirements in the DB folder in the caches PHP file, and it does require some language strings to be defined. You create a cache with the cache make, calling the static method in the cache class with the make method. You then set the data with your set, and you can also set many, you can set multiple cache objects at the same time. And in reverse, you can get the cached item, or you can get many as well to collect several cached items. And then you delete the cache when you don't need it anymore. Okay, and definition. So this is a definition of the cache that you want to use. So the main ones that you have is the area. So this is the key for your cache item. The mode, so what kind of mode we are talking about: mode application, mode user, a session, or mode request. And then the simple keys and simple data. So this helps with managing the data that is being kept in the cache. If the data is simple, as in it's just pure text or something like that, then you can set the data to true and the simple keys to true if you're only using A to Z, capital and lower cases, and 0 to 9 and underscore. That means there's no need for Moodle to hash the data or the keys to store the cached item. That makes it a little bit quicker, less intense. Okay, and then another one that is useful or worth knowing about is the TTL property or key, which is the time to live. It's not recommended to actually use that. Now, in the case of session and request cache items, they get destroyed at the end of the session or at the end of the request. But for the other ones, the application ones, it is not recommended to use the time to live because some backends don't really manage that very well, and you should be able to work out when your cache needs updating. Okay. So for more information, there's some links in this presentation. So back in our code, let's start off by defining our cache. Okay, so that goes in the DB folder, and we need a new file, caches.php. So this is our file, usual stuff at the top, and then there's a link there, quick reference page, see quick reference, create a definition, but we have already discussed that in our presentation. So we are setting our key to Wikipedia data. Our mode is going to be mode application because we want to share that content with the whole class and keep it for as long as possible. We're going to use simple keys because we're going to keep our keys simple, but because our content is HTML and we're never quite sure just what qualifies as simple data, we'll leave it as not being true for simple data. So the default for simple data is false. And with this, we need to define a language string. Okay. This is our language string here. Cache definition for our Wikipedia data key. Okay. So now in our code, we can set, update, and delete cache objects. But first we need to get content and then cache it. So we'll need to start off by getting the content. Now this functionality about getting the content will be required both in our lib.php file and in a view PHP file when the user is looking at the content. So we'll need to define our functionality outside of those two files. So what we're going to do is create a classes file, and we'll put our functionality to load the third-party library and make the request and get the data in that class. So let's create that file. If everything's in order, we just return the content. Very straightforward, very simple piece of code. So now we can turn our attention back to lib.php. Now, since we've set the simple keys property in our definition, we can't use like the snippet URL for our data key. As mentioned before, the simple keys consist only of the letters of the alphabet, uppercase or lowercase, 0 to 9, and underscore. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to use the ID of the record that relates to the content that's been collected or cached. That means that we'll have different ones depending on whether images are included. So we could have two cached items, one for the content with no images and no links, and the other for the exact same snippet but with the links, etc. So I think that will work for us, but you might have your own opinion about what would be a better way to go about doing that. So I'm going to add some code in, and we'll actually discuss how it works then. So I've added some code in add instance. So we've got the stuff that we've done previously, which was to set up the record, but now we've added in the bit to get the content. So we are calling our mod wiki snippet class snippet with the get, and we're passing the data that we've just worked with that came in, and we've adjusted for the check boxes, and we pass that to our third-party library via our snippet class. Okay. And if we get a snippet, we then store our record store the data that came with the form, and then we actually cache the content. So we call cache make, passing through our component name, our plugin name, and the key for the definition, and then we set the item, the cached item, the ID of our record, that is the ID that came back from insert record there. And then our data is actually an array. It's an array that includes the time at which we've got the data, so that's been set up there, and then the actual content, and then we just return the ID as we did previously. If there's been an error, we can then catch the error here and raise exceptions for the error. Okay, so that's what's in our add instance. We didn't have to check for existing content because there wouldn't have been. It's a new instance. Yeah. So now let's look at update instance. But before we do, let's define our strings. So we've added a couple of strings here to handle the increased functionality we've added to our libphp. So let's go back to libphp and look at the update instance. So our update instance, same stuff as we had the last time currently. So checking our checkboxes, etc. Get the record from the database. We've got updated equals false is a flag, and then we check, like we did the last time, we check if there's any changes from what we have in the database. So all the way up to here, if this updated is only set to true if there has been a change. Now before we go and update the record, we then have to check our cache. So we get our cache again. It says make, but really in a sense we are getting, and again we've seen that previously. And then if we haven't updated, so if we've updated, we're going to have to refresh the cache anyway, so we don't need to worry about that. But if the data hasn't been updated, we check the cache. So we get our ID will be the ID of our record. Yep. And then we get that from our cache. Anything that has that ID from our class, we get the value for our time to live, and then we check whether the data in the cache is still fresh, or do we need to update it. If we do have to update it, we'd also set the flag to true. So in a sense, what we're going to do is we're going to restore the data. Okay, so if updated, we get the content. So we get the content from our class again, and then we reset the the cache to the current time. Okay, and then finally we update the record. The other bit we need to do is the actual deletions. So our delete function now. So we only get the ID for that. So we get the cache. We make our cache object. We get the ID and we just delete it. So we just call cache delete and just delete that ID. And then we also delete the record from the table. So that's fairly straightforward. So once we've got all this, now to view the actual snippet, we will need a view PHP. So let's go ahead and create that now. We get our snippet ID will be the instance of our course module. That will be our record ID, and then we can actually go and get the record, our snippet record, based on that. Okay, we then make sure that the person is logged in and is entitled to be in the course, etc. And then we do our usual stuff with the page setup, because we're going to generate output. Okay, and then not only are we checking that the item is fresh, we are actually getting the content from the cache if it is fresh, and only updating if it isn't fresh. So we check to see whether it's fresh, and then if it is, we actually just set that as our content. If on the other hand it isn't fresh and needs updating, we would then set a flag update required, and we will go ahead and do the same thing we did in libphp, get the content and add it into and reset the cache, and then set content to the new content that has come through. We then do our output stuff. Okay, so that's it for the presentation. To watch other extracts from the course, click on the playlist link, or alternatively watch the video describing the course content. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and thanks for watching.